The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, my name's Alison Atkinson and welcome to the standardisation webinar for beauty and spa therapies. In the room with me today is Sarah Farrell. She's the principal moderator for both Level 2 and Level 3. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm sure that we'll have delegates for both of those levels on the line. We will be looking at, you've probably seen the material that we've got, but we will be looking at a Level 3 piece. But don't worry, for you Level 2 people, this will be perfectly relevant for you. So, to clarify, all participants are currently in listen-only mode whilst we take you through a series of slides. There'll be an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of the presentation, so please take a note of these as we go through. At any time, you can type your questions into the question box on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, but if you want to concentrate on the slides, you'll be given some time at the end to type in those questions. So, if you do experience or are at the moment experiencing any technical difficulties during the webinar, please be assured that we are recording this session, so you'll be able to access this in a day or two. I think it's probably more than a day or two, actually, looking at the other ones that we've just delivered. But it won't be long before you'll be able to access it. I'll point you towards the support available to you at the end, but if you have any particular questions you'd like answering immediately, the Technicals and Moderation Support team will be happy to help you. Their number is 01924 206 719. So, as an extension of the Generic Centre Standardisation webinar, City and Guilds have produced subject-specific ones where we carry out standardisation on some learner work from last year's synoptic assignment. You were sent this work when you booked onto this webinar, along with the associated paperwork, and asked to carry out a marking activity. Hopefully you've done this so that we can start to go through the thoughts and justifications of the marking by Sarah, the principal moderator. So Sarah, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Okay, welcome everybody. Looking at some of your names, I'm familiar with you and do know you, but those that I don't, just welcome to this webinar. Our objectives for the day, we're going to explain the justification of the marks by the PM for last year's synoptic assignment. So remember, it's last year's synoptic assignment. We're going to highlight good practice in the use of City and Guild documentation, facilitate a standardisation activity, and give a reminder of typical activities for internal standardisation. And as Alison said, there's plenty of opportunities for questions. And if we have lots and lots of questions, we will answer them perhaps after the webinar and send out the responses.
Okay. So let's have a look then at the material. Oh, I wasn't on the right place, was I? Silly me.
Okay, so last year's task brief was about a sort of top-to-toe sort of spa day, and the students had to, and it was up to them which order they carried out the treatment. They had to complete a body massage, they had to do a facial electrical treatment, body electrical using 2 pieces of equipment, and carry out a dry spa treatment. They had to carry out the consultation and body and skin analysis, carry out the treatments, give advice and recommendations, and then afterwards they had time to sort of review and self-evaluate. I think those that ran it last year, the clients were unknown to the students, and they did literally advertise it as a spa day. And several centres had clients coming in and would break for lunch during that day. So as a marker within the centre, we had to complete a practical observation record. And this practical observation record could be completed for the final moderation either in handwritten or can be typed. And what we did also recommend was that any sort of responses to oral questions should be logged as well. With the marking grid, which we will look at later, this year we are going through 5 AOs. We have taken out communication because communication tended to naturally occur within attention to detail and within the practical application. So this is a learner material from a candidate, and last year we did find that several centres used pre-populated sort of tick box type consultation sheets that we've previously been quite used to, and we did find that this did not help the higher level learners but actually prompted the lower level learners. So what we have done this year, we've taken that out of the mix and we have actually given you a generic consultation record form for candidates to fill out. So looking at this learners material from last year, obviously they've given information about the health and lifestyle of the client, so to discuss sort of their diet, what perhaps her problems were, what they sort of noted. A quick reminder, all clients prior to this synoptic should be checked for contraindications. We did have a situation last year where there was a client that was contraindicated and we had to stop the treatment, and that put a lot of stress on the learner. Luckily, the learner could come back on another day to redo that synoptic. This learner has carried out quite a detailed body analysis, going through sort of posture, looking from the anterior and posterior view. She has even mentioned muscles in their Latin form. She's even mentioned about ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. So this is shown that this person is a high level learner. Then we've got her skin analysis, and she said, looking at my skin, my initial findings were, so she sort of looked at the skin and jotted down what her initial findings were. She's also logged and included information about her client's skincare routine, what the client does when she's away from the salon. Then we have the completed treatment plan, and what we found last year, students as they were working would note down their treatment plan, would write as they were working during sort of natural breaks of the spa, particularly if the spa was drying on the body, they would make note of what they would do next. If they had an electrical machine on the body, they would actually make a note of perhaps the timings, the muscles, the controls, etc. of the machine. And then they were allowed a period of time at the end of the synoptic to either write or type up their treatment plan. And this is this learner's treatment plan. So she has detailed her timings, how long she's taken for each treatment, what she's incorporated into those treatments, and then she's gone into more detail about the actual treatment that she has carried out, and giving sort of indication that she's looking at the detail of the treatment. Here, this ensured the client was warm and the product would fully absorb into the skin. She's also shown that she's actually taking note and actually made good use of her time. Whilst the mask was on, she tidied her workstation. So she has clearly detailed everything that she has done. Going on to the body electrical, again, she's shown the 2 different treatments that she has used. She's actually talked about how she set the machine, what muscle she used, and why she was doing this treatment, and why she set the machine at the controls. This candidate obviously started with the spa, followed with the body electrical, and then went on to the body massage. it is purely up to the candidates which order they worked. We did find that the lower level candidates seemed to look around the room and then follow what somebody else was doing, but it was purely up to them. So last treatment she carried out was a facial, and again you can see the detail. She's written how long she's done for each sort of section. For instance here we've got 10 minutes dust incrustation, and she's clearly stated the procedure that she followed and why she has followed that procedure. Coming to the end of the treatment, she's given client recommendations of what she should be doing. Also, it is recommended within, and it's clearly written down in the tasks, that we have client feedback. So this client has been very good with her feedback. Some clients perhaps don't give as detailed feedback. They might just say, this is a good treatment. And then the student candidate has reflected on her synoptic. Another form that we have to use, we have to have the Declaration of Authenticity form. So when we're thinking about moderation, we have to have the consultation, treatment plan, client evaluation, student reflection, Declaration of Authenticity. And this year it is slightly different because we have got to tick whether the candidate has received any additional support in the production of this work. And that is an extra on this sheet. Right, as marker within the centre, you will be expected to fill out a practical observation form. And just looking at the shaded in yellow, these notes are an accurate reflection of what you have seen with your learner. And please note anything that has been good practice and perhaps also weaknesses. We did find last year that several people stated all the negatives, what the learner did not do, but failed to include the positives. So it was actually quite hard to make that justification of why a learner has got a certain grade overall. So as we go through these, we've slightly changed the form. We've put the AOs and on the side with a little description of what's expected. These forms can be handwritten or they can be typed. If you've got several markers marking one group, you could have several forms and upload several forms. It doesn't really matter as long as they are readable. So if we've got here, we've said a recall, very professional, confident, a little bit about the recall, how the learner worked. Product recommendations were well communicated to the client. So it's getting a real holistic picture of how that learner worked with that client. There's also reference on here, just quickly reading, referring back, no, that will be on the CRF, sorry, my mistake. Going down to the understanding, again, excellent understanding, and also on this form we will also include the questions that were asked, so it also shows how much understanding she has about the in-depth knowledge of the treatments. Then we go down to sort of the practical technical skills, how she applied, how she worked, was she flowing, did she show good dexterity skills, etc. And then we go down to bringing it together. Did she draw from sort of their breadth of knowledge and understanding and skills? Did she sometimes students have actually had to think and actually have had to change things around because there might not have been a machine ready when they wanted to do it. Some students we found sort of totally left clients, wandered off to go and collect other bits and pieces. So it is sort of bringing it together and how they sort of reacted with that whole treatment. Then attention to detail. Did the treatment plan, did it meet the client's requirements? Did she give extra sort of little attentions, as in doing a hand massage, foot massage, perhaps whilst the spa body was on? And if you notice, we've written here sort of oral questions that were asked and the responses. And I would say with oral questions, just be mindful that you're not interrupting perhaps the whole practical experience. Often students will have pregnant pauses, as we've said before, when machines are turned on and the muscles are contracting. So you might want to go in and ask, can you tell me why you've set up that machine in this way, etc.
Just looking at some of these verbal questions, actually, Sarah, and clearly you've got the question that was asked there. Then presumably that's the candidate's response. Is it just a summary of the response? To what extent would you expect to see that sort of word-for-word response? Is it just a kind of a summary?
That's quite an in-depth one.
Right.
Often you would just have a summary, answered it correctly, talked about how to adapt the treatment.
And then the assessor gives some feedback there? And who's that feedback going to? What's that the point of writing that?
It's just to show that it's linking with the response to show that that learner has clear understanding. So she might have answered that question, but actually when she's been working with it, she might also realise, yes, she has a clear understanding of how to adapt that treatment.
Okay. You might get some questions, only because it's a question in my mind. How many oral questions would you expect?
It varies. There's no hard and fast rule. I tend to, when I'm assessing and marking, I tend to go in and ask questions just to confirm. If I'm not sure or I haven't seen them do something, I will just go in and say, can you explain why have you set the machine at that? How have you tested your machine?
Excellent, thank you. Then obviously you've got your signature there and the date that it happened. Yes. Great. Okay, we'll move on to the candidate record form.
So with the candidate record form, this form holistically looks at everything. So it is not just a repeat of the practical observation, because within the level 3 beauty therapy, there is only one task. It is the synoptic practical, the top to toe. And what we found last year, sometimes the candidate record form literally mirrored what was said in the practical observation form. Remember, the practical observation form is what you see during that practical session. The candidate record form looks at the practical observation form, it looks at the completed treatment plan, the client evaluation, and also the learner's evaluation. So it's looking at everything holistically. One point to remember is, if you've got a lower level learner, don't think that they should be in the lower band the whole time, because what you've got to understand is the percentage of marks allocated for each AO1. So if we look at recall, that is 10% of the marks. Compare that to practical, which is 45% of the marks. So if they are in the low band of the practical and they only get 4 marks, that is really, really, really low. So just be mindful of that. You will have learners that will migrate across all the different bands backwards and forwards, perhaps.
I think an interesting point here as well. We'll go on to some of these justification comments when we look back at the slides. But an interesting bit here is also that this form has changed since last year. Not only have the amount of assessment objectives changed, and I think originally last year you had 6. Yeah. So they're now only 5. So we've kind of weaved the other bits into these 5. But also we've given you a bit more help in completing this form. We've put the weighting, percentage weighting concentrating on. We've given you the marks across the top as well, so you can also see the bands. So this is band 1, this is band 2 and band 3. So across all of those, we've just given you a little bit of help, so you don't need to keep continually flicking back to the marking grid to be able to complete this form. So you should, once you get to know some of those comments and examples within the marking grid, you can just kind of fill this in much easier. So, okay, so the other thing to say is that when you total up your marks at the bottom here, make sure that it is calculated correctly, because we did see last year there were some miscalculations, which if this is the mark that's being uploaded onto the portal, and then we find that these, once we look at that particular piece of evidence, we find that it's incorrectly calculated, it might set that work out of tolerance in terms of moderation. So it's important to remember just to do that calculation. If you're not good at numbers like me, use a calculator. Okay, we'll go back to then the justification of marks. So we've got here, this is assessment objective number 1, and this is an excerpt out of the candidate record form. So Sarah, if you'd like to give us a bit of narrative on that.
Okay, so if we look at assessment objective 1, which is recall of knowledge, what we've had, remember the excerpt is from the CRF, so that's the holistic marking of the whole process. It was a confident assessment, consistent depth and breadth of knowledge shown throughout the top to toe with no errors throughout the treatments. Hence, she has got the full 6 marks that could be allocated. There were good responses to oral questions. Recommendations to the client were detail extensive. So she's definitely at that higher end. As we go through onto the next one, which is understanding, again, we've made comments here, see treatment plan and observation records. So instead of perhaps rewriting things, you can reference it back to the learner's treatment plan, the learner's observation record. And again, this person, if we look at the examples of the different bandings, we've sort of slightly reduced it here. If you look at the full marking grid, it goes into more detail and gives you more sort of descriptions for each banding. This learner has come into the higher banding because they've adapted treatments to meet the client's needs. They've fully justified the treatments and discussed appropriate alternative. Treatments were carried out accurately with a great deal of thought and excellent understanding.
Yeah, if you look at your material that was sent to you, you'll have the full marking grid. We couldn't fit it all on the slide, so it was a bit of a struggle. So as you know, those of you that have used marking grid before, these blue bits are all the generic sort of statements that identify the descriptors of limited, good and excellent understanding, for example. And then the orange bits, and they follow with examples. They are subject-specific examples. So further down here on your marking grid that you can see yourselves, you'll see that there are limited, good and excellent versions of these for this specific subject area.
And again, so remember this year practical is 45% of the overall 60 marks that are allocated for the synoptic. So we've given this learner 23 out of 27. And again, if you read that, it's excellent. One thing I would possibly say with this one, perhaps give a couple of reasons why she did not get 27 marks. What could she have done that was just slightly losing her those extra marks? And again, bringing it together, that's 20% of the marks. The learner reflected fully on the information presented during the consultation. So she's actually taken on board what was seen during the consultation, what the client gave her, the information the client gave her. She brought it all together. She considered an appropriate treatment plan, and she used her time sort of effectively adapting working practices. And again, we've made a comment there, see observation, record and treatment plan. So it's referencing back to other documents that were completed during the practical application. Attending to detail. Okay, so here the learner was highly focused, tended to the client's needs throughout, monitoring the client's reactions and comfort, showed extreme care and accuracy with very few errors. So very few errors. There might have been a couple of errors there, so hence hasn't got the full marks. And self-reflected and evaluated the whole package, stating areas for improvement. So again, it's looking holistically. It's not just looking at the practical application, it's looking at her evaluation and the treatment plan that she has produced.
Okay, we can move on to the questions section of this webinar now. So I'm going to just stop the recording for a moment whilst I ask you to type in those questions into the control panel. We'll be watching out for those, and we'll get back to you within a couple of minutes when we see some questions coming up. So we will speak to you in a moment. Okay, we're coming back in with a couple of questions now, so please feel free to continue to type those into the questions panel, and we will get back to you. If we don't have time to do all of the answers, then we will aim to get a document with the answers out to you within hopefully a week. So we've got this one question here, which is, thank you, this is very helpful. Do you also have examples of learner work or feedback at the lower levels to compare? Because obviously we've looked at a very good piece of work this morning. So Sarah, what's your answer to that?
Unfortunately, we don't. Last year was the first year that we have run the technicals. What I would suggest is, if you're running them as a centre, once the work has been moderated, just try and keep examples of a lower level work, a medium level work and a higher level work, and use it sort of the following year as a moderation and standardisation within your team, and you will get a feel. I think if we're experienced assessors, markers, etc., you will know going into a salon which one of your learners is your lower level learner and which one is your higher level learner. We've also had another question about rank ordering learners' work, and what I would suggest is, when all the work is being completed, e.g. the treatment plan, the client feedback, the evaluation and the practical observation form, what I would suggest is, as a team, you know, more than one, two of you, if you haven't got a big team, just put them out in rank order. Put the ones that you think are your lower level learners in a pile, ones that you think are your middle, and ones that you think are your higher level learners, and then go through them and perhaps complete the CRF to justify those grades given. And remember, as I've said during the presentation, please don't think your lower band learner sits in the lower bands all the way through, because if that is the case, they possibly will not pass.
Yeah, we'll look at grade boundaries actually in a bit, Sarah, because we look at the qualification report, and obviously the warning, the health warning with looking at last year's grade boundaries is obviously that they may well change in any subsequent year, but yeah, that's somewhere to start looking at the amount of marks a candidate gets compared to whether they passed or whether they achieved a merit or distinction. Got another question here, Sarah. Is there any information for the marking of the comp therapies?
What we have is, we have the qualification report for the complementary therapies, we have the qualification handbook. I don't think there is any standardised learner mark, because I think last year there were very, very small numbers that took up with complementary therapy. So at this moment in time, No.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Rob here. We're confused with regards to the number of learners that will be sampled for the synoptic assessment. On our introduction email from our moderator, they have suggested that 6 learners will be sampled over the day, but we have level 2 and level 3 qualifications. There are 12 learners for level 3, and according to the sample guidelines, this would mean that all learners would be sampled. Some guidance would be helpful.
Hello, Rob. Yes, there's 2 points here, level 2 and level 3. If they have the same marker, the moderator may say, I will only moderate and come in and see, for instance, level 3 qualifications. They will only come in on one day and they will not visit for the level 2. If there are different markers, it might mean that the moderator will come in on 2 days, particularly if you're running them on 2 different times. If you're running level 2 and level 3 on the same day and you've got 6 level 2 and 6 level 3 going in 2 different salons, they will possibly be there for the full day and will rotate between the 2 different salons. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. But also I think, Rob, there is some confusion. It sounds like that there's some confusion with how many learners' evidence pieces you upload onto the moderation portal for the remote moderation. So remember, there are 2 versions of moderation that we're considering here. We've got the visiting moderation, where the practical synoptic task will be looked at by a moderator, and that moderator will have requested 6 candidates to come and have a look at. Out of those 6 candidates, there should be at least 50% of those people that they saw, 50% of those uploaded within the sample for remote moderation. So we see 6 on our visit, and then we see 12. It's likely to be 12, and it depends on the numbers in your cohort. We'll see 12 pieces uploaded onto the moderation portal. So that will be per level of qualification as well. So it's likely that you will be asked to upload 12 pieces of level 2 and 12 pieces of level 3 for that remote moderation activity. And as Sarah's just said, on a visit day, depending on the amount of markers that you might have in the centre, you might be expected to have 6 level 2 candidates running and 6 level 3 candidates running, depending if you have the same marker. But yeah, would that happen in a...
Not really. I would say, Rob, if you've got different markers, it'd probably be 2 different visits, 2 separate days. And as Alison said, uploading at least 50%. What we found last year, most centres uploaded all the 6 candidates that were seen during the visit, plus the extras.
Okay, we're going to continue with the presentation whilst people continue to type in those questions. We've not had that many yet, so it's looking good. But please carry on typing those questions in. We're just going to have a look at this next slide, which is an example. This slide comes out of the generic standardisation webinar that it's published on the website, and that was published in December. But it's basically a reminder of typical internal standardisation activities, so some that are recommended for you to carry out. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them or ask Sarah to go through all of them, but she might have some examples within some of these activities that are specific or quite pertinent to beauty and spa therapies.
I think, as I've said about rank ordering candidates' work, one important point is reading, it sounds silly, reading the whole synoptic assignment and discussing as a team ways that candidates might generate evidence. As I've said, level 3 beauty is possibly quite straightforward. But one thing I want to draw your attention to is the synoptic assignment. If you downloaded it early in the year, there was a typo error that said minimum of 2 clients. That was incorrect. It is recommended that a student has 1 client for the whole top to toe. with a little if that is not possible, they could have 2, but it should not be a minimum of 2 clients. For the level 3 synoptic, it works best if they definitely have 1 client and they take that client through the whole process. And I think the clients really valued that experience and having time out themselves to just lay there.
I think now that the synoptic assessment window is open, it would be a good idea that centres actually download the latest version of that synoptic assignment pack, because sometimes things do change. There might be typo errors like Sarah's identified there. So it is a good idea just to check your versions that you're working from. And if you'd have had a look at the one in September, that there has been a change. Sarah, have you checked on the website that new version is up there?
Yes, it is.
Excellent.
Yes, it is. And just thinking about, again, comparing level 3 to level 2. Level 2 is the first time this year. And with level 2, they will have 2 tasks to do. One is on a client that they know, and the other task is on a client that they do not know. And I'm just looking at the third point from the bottom, using a selection of evidence, including photographic. You will notice in the level 2, excuse me, that they will have to produce 10 photographs on the client that they know with regard nails, hands and feet, makeup, without and with makeup. So perhaps it's worth looking at and thinking about how are these candidates going to carry out or take these photos. Are you going to have an iPad? Are you going to allow the candidates to use their phones to take them? Think about the lighting and the detail of the photograph. We at our centre, what we're going to do is to upload the photographs. We've created a PowerPoint and we've clearly had 10 little slides, and the students are going to upload their pictures into each sort of slide of the PowerPoint, and then they're going to clearly mark with their name, with their candidate registration number.
Thanks, Sarah. And certainly when looking at doing some of these activities here, I mean, obviously take a look at the example of types of people that should take part in these activities, but also I think in a lot of subject areas, we also like to invite subject experts in. It might be salon owners that might want to take part in some of the assessments or the delivery of this qualification. So if they are invited in, it is a really good idea to make sure that they carry out some of these activities as well. In particular, discussing and familiarising with the talk content found in the qualification handbook, because some of those subject experts, yes, they might be salon owners, they might be working in the industry perfectly well, but they might not be too familiar with what is in the qualification, and so that might be a good one to start off with. And certainly, as Sarah has said, looking at versions of evidence that candidates would produce. As a separate note to that, if you have a look at the document that's been produced this year by City and Guilds, which is called The Requirements for Uploading Evidence. It's a very short document, but it gives you lots of information about file sizes and the way to collate that evidence and how to label it correctly and those sorts of things. Lots of hints and tips. So I think that's another good signpost to a document. Whilst we're on that, we've got some support and resources that are available to you. We've got the City and Guilds website tech back pages. Have a look at that. You'll find your centre documents library there is packed full of documents that you will need to read to carry out your role as obviously as deliverer and then obviously as an assessor as well. We've also got the email address of the Technicals and Moderation Support team. Now, if you do have any particular issues or difficulties, it's not your moderator usually that will answer those questions, it's these people here. Okay, you've got a telephone number there and an email address there. So please try to direct your questions to that team. They are there specifically for technicals. If you've got any particular moderation issues or questions, then please just quick email. They get back to you really quickly. And you'll get the up-to-date information. So rather than use your moderator, who is not like an EQA in the sense that they're not available to you for support during the year, unfortunately, these people are. Okay. So we've also then as well got this year's qualification report, which I will show you. It's not there. It is.
I think it's underneath there.
There. So you can get to that by going onto the City and Guilds website, tap in the number there, 6003. That will bring you onto this page. If you have a look at Level 3 assessment materials, so click on Level 3, click on assessment materials, where you'll also find your synoptic and your mark schemes to specific tests. If we look into past papers, right at the bottom of that is the qualification report coming out of last year. So we clicked on that, and this is what we're looking at now. So because we've been talking about the synoptic assignment, we'll go into a little bit of the data that has come out of last year's entries, and we can see the grade boundaries that are listed up here. So as you can see, out of a total of 6, a candidate would have needed to get last year 23 marks to be able to pass. 33 marks for a merit and 43 marks for a distinction for their synoptic assignment. And as you'll see here, 91% of candidates actually achieved the synoptic. 36 got a distinction, 30 got a merit, and 24 got a pass. Along with that data, there's some pretty interesting commentary coming from Sarah, the principal moderator, where she's given you some hints and tips and some pitfalls and good stuff about what centres have been doing last year. So it's a good idea, if you are delivering the qualification, to have a look at this document. As I say, it's not very long. I think it's only about 9 or 10 pages. You can also get the data coming out of both series of exams as well. So you've got quite a lot of information there to have a look at. The grade boundaries for the exams, how many people passed, who got merits and distinctions, and those sorts of things. So as it looks at the moment, you know, that data is looking pretty good. You're obviously doing something good in your centres, so well done for that. I'm just going to have a quick look again if there are any more questions, and then we will complete this webinar. I think there looks like there is one question. Could you let me know when the moderation portal opens so that we can familiarise ourselves with it? Also, is there any guidance and dates published when this information should be uploaded by? Yes, there is. Do you want to answer that, or do you?
There is. If you're in a centre, you should have had an email for webinar training, because we've had webinar training at our centre. And what happens is the quality contact will nominate different people within that centre who have got sort of uploading rights. So what we did at our centre last year, we had learning managers that had uploading rights, and then the learning managers will allocate to some of the assessors to upload the information. The work needs to be uploaded onto the moderation portal by the 18th of May. So it needs to be up there for the 18th of May. And Alison said, depending on your numbers, it will be 12.
Yeah, it's quite likely
usually
to be
12 in the initial sample.
Yes. Yeah.
And just another thought on, moving on from your question there, Rob, optional units. Remember, with beauty, level 2 and level 3, we have to complete optional units. The paperwork is very clear. It is very, very similar to the VRQ. So again, think about your optional units. That doesn't have to be completed until June.
Okay, and I'm just going to see if I can find on the website, which is, again, is quite risky because it's not working for me, where there is actually a technicals date kind of flowchart thingy, technicals and tech back. Let's have a look. Actually, in your welcome pack, you should have a link to those specific dates. Where are we?
Say delivers that one. Try that one.
Might not be that one.
No.
Don't know. Yeah, we're redesigning the website. Okay. So, resources and support. Let's have a look at that one. Need to get onto this, don't we? All right. teaching. Have a little look on this page though. I clicked on the technicals and tech back pages. There's all the resources and support that you need, including the events and any webinars that are coming up. That's obviously how you got onto the webinar today. So I'll just check that. No, there's no more questions. So I will find out that information for you, and we'll send you, if you haven't already got it, we will send you the that checklist. It's a checklist that takes you through the year with all the months and things that you've got to do. So okay, we've come to the end of the webinar. Hopefully we've answered most of your questions. Please continue to ask questions by emailing the technical moderation support team. I'd like to, at this stage, say thank you to Sarah for her expertise and her time today, and thank you to you for listening in. So thanks very much, and I hope you have a good day.